Maya Rodriguez had always been different. At 23, she carried herself with a quiet strength that most people her age hadn't yet discovered. Her arms were covered in intricate tattoos that told stories of places she'd been and battles she'd fought, though no one at Riverside Community College bothered to ask what they meant. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the art building as Maya walked down the hallway, her worn leather jacket creaking softly with each step. Students pressed against lockers and whispered as she passed, their eyes following the colorful designs that snaked up her arms and disappeared beneath her sleeves. She'd grown used to the stares, the whispers, the assumptions people made about who she was based on her appearance. "There goes the troublemaker," she heard someone mutter behind her. Maya didn't turn around. She'd learned long ago that fighting every ignorant comment would leave her exhausted and accomplish nothing. Instead, she focused on the reason she was here, to finish her degree in art therapy, to help other people heal the way art had helped her heal. The classroom door stood open, and Maya could hear the chatter of students already inside. Professor Williams had assigned them to paint something meaningful from their past, something that represented growth or change in their lives. Maya knew exactly what she wanted to paint, but she also knew it would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. She stepped into the room and immediately felt the energy shift. Conversations quieted, and she could feel 20 pairs of eyes examining her. The other students were typical college kids from suburban backgrounds, clean-cut and privileged in ways they probably didn't even recognize. Maya found an empty easel in the back corner and set down her supplies. "Well, well," came a voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look what the wind blew in." Maya looked up to see Jessica Chen, a petite girl with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Jessica was surrounded by her usual group of followers, all of them looking at Maya like she was some kind of exotic animal in a zoo. "I heard you were taking this class," Jessica continued, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Art class? Really? What's next? Are you going to tell us you write poetry too?" A few students snickered, and Maya felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest. But she'd learned control in places these kids couldn't even imagine. She simply nodded politely and began arranging her paints on the small table next to her easel. "I'm serious," Jessica pressed on, emboldened by the attention she was getting. "What could someone like you possibly know about real art? Unless finger painting counts." More laughter rippled through the room. Maya's hands stilled for just a moment, but then she continued setting up her workspace. She could handle this. She'd handled much worse. "Maybe she's here to learn how to tattoo flowers instead of skulls," added Marcus, one of Jessica's friends. He was a tall, lanky kid who probably thought he was being clever. "You know, something a little more feminine." "Actually," said another voice, "I think the skulls suit her. Very edgy. Very threatening." Maya finally looked up, meeting the gaze of each student who had spoken. Her eyes were calm, steady, and completely unafraid. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. The simple question seemed to catch them off guard. They'd expected anger, defensiveness, maybe even tears. Instead, Maya's voice was level and controlled, with an undertone that suggested she'd faced much more serious challenges than a group of sheltered college students. Jessica recovered first, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, she speaks. I was starting to think you were mute. That would explain why you chose art instead of something that requires actual communication skills." "Like what?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "Like business," Jessica said proudly. "I'm double majoring in business and marketing. Real subjects that will actually matter in the real world. Not like, whatever this is supposed to be." Maya nodded slowly. "That's nice," she said, and turned back to her paints. The dismissal clearly frustrated Jessica, who was used to getting bigger reactions from her targets. "That's it? That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say?" Maya asked without looking up. I don't know, defend yourself. Explain why you think you belong here. Tell us what makes you think you can just walk into our classroom with your tattoos and, your attitude and, fit in. Maya set down her brush and, turned to face Jessica fully. The room had gone completely quiet now, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Even Professor Williams, who had just walked in, stopped in the doorway to observe the exchange. I don't think I need to explain anything to you, Maya said calmly. But, I will say this, you don't know me, and, you don't know my story. You're making judgments based on how I look, which says a lot more about you than it does about me. Jessica's face flushed red. Oh please, spare me the victim act. We all know exactly what kind of person gets tattoos like that. What kind of life choices lead to looking like you do? What kind of life choices? Maya asked, her voice still perfectly controlled. You know, Jessica said, waving her hand vaguely. The kind that involve questionable decisions. Probably drugs, maybe crime, definitely no real education or future prospects. Am I wrong? The room was so quiet that Maya could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Professor Williams started to step forward, clearly planning to intervene, but Maya held up a hand to stop him. She could handle this herself. You are wrong, Maya said simply. But, that's okay. People make mistakes. Mistakes? Jessica laughed harshly. The only mistake here is the admissions office letting someone like you into this program. This is supposed to be a serious academic environment, not some kind of charity case experiment. Jessica, Professor Williams warned, finally, finding his voice. That's enough. But, Jessica was on a roll now, feeding off the attention and, the nervous energy in the room. No, I think we need to address this. Look at her. Does she look like someone who belongs in an art therapy program? Does she look like someone who should be trusted to help other people with their problems? I wouldn't trust her to what? Maya interrupted, and, for the first time, there was an edge to her voice that made several students take a step back. To what, Jessica? Jessica faltered for a moment, suddenly, aware that she might have pushed too far. There was something in Maya's eyes now, something that suggested depths of experience and strength that Jessica couldn't understand. I just think. Jessica stammered. You think that because I have tattoos, because I don't dress like you or talk like you or come from the same background as you, that makes me less than you, Maya said, stepping closer. You think it makes me dangerous, or stupid, or unworthy of being here. I didn't say that, Jessica protested weakly. You didn't have to, Maya replied. It's written all over your face, and, in every word you've said since I walked in here. You've decided who I am without knowing the first thing about me. The room was electric with tension now. Some students looked uncomfortable, realizing that things had gone too far. Others seemed fascinated by the confrontation, waiting to see what would happen next. Look, Jessica said, trying to regain some of her earlier confidence. I'm just saying that there are certain standards here. Certain expectations. And, you just don't meet them. Maya stared at her for a long moment, and, Jessica began to squirm under the intensity of that gaze. There was something unsettling about Maya's composure, something that suggested she was operating on a completely different level than the rest of them. Standards, Maya repeated slowly. Expectations. And, you think you're qualified to determine what those should be? I think I'm more qualified than someone who looks like they just rolled out of a biker bar, Jessica shot back, trying to regain the upper hand. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya's expression didn't change, but, something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. Even the students who had been laughing earlier seemed to sense that Jessica had crossed a line. A biker bar, Maya said thoughtfully. Interesting assumption. Tell me, Jessica, what do you know about biker bars? Or bikers, for that matter? I know enough, Jessica said defensively. Do you? Maya asked. Do you know that some of the most honorable people I've ever met ride motorcycles? Do you know that some of them have served their country with more courage and sacrifice than you could imagine? Do you know that some of them have saved more lives than you've probably even touched? Jessica's confidence was clearly shaking now, but she pushed forward anyway. Oh, so now you're going to lecture me about honor and service? That's rich, coming from someone who what? Maya asked quietly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Professor Williams stepped forward again. All right, that's really enough now. Let's all take a step back and, no, Maya said, not taking her eyes off Jessica. Let her finish. I want to hear what she thinks someone like me is capable of. Or not capable of. Jessica looked around the room, suddenly, aware that she had become the center of attention in a way that no longer felt comfortable. The other students were watching her with expressions ranging from concern to disapproval. Even her closest friends seemed to be distancing themselves from the confrontation. I just think. Jessica started, but her voice trailed off. You think what? Maya pressed. That I'm some kind of criminal. That I'm violent. That I'm stupid. That I don't deserve to be here. Say it, Jessica. Say what you really think. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Jessica opened her mouth several times but no words came out. She had painted herself into a corner, and she knew it. Maya waited patiently, her arms crossed, her expression calm but watchful. She had learned patience in places where losing control meant losing everything. She could wait as long as it took. Finally, Jessica found her voice again, but it was smaller now, less certain. I think you're not what we expected in this program. And, what did you expect? Maya asked. People like us, Jessica said quietly. People who fit in. Maya nodded slowly. People like you. I see. And, what makes people like you more deserving of being here than people like me? Jessica didn't answer. She couldn't, because she was beginning to realize that there was no good answer to that question. Is it because your parents paid for your education? Maya asked. Because you've never had to work for anything in your life? Because you've never faced real challenges or made real sacrifices? Because you've never been tested in ways that actually matter? You don't know anything about my life, Jessica protested, but the fire had gone out of her voice. You're right, Maya agreed. I don't. Just like you don't know anything about mine. The difference is, I'm not standing here making judgments about who you are based on your appearance or where you come from. Professor Williams cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all get started on today's assignment, he suggested. We can discuss class expectations and respect for our fellow students another time. But, Maya wasn't finished. She took another step toward Jessica, and her voice when she spoke was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. You want to know what I think, Jessica? I think you're scared. I think you've lived such a sheltered, privileged life that meeting someone different, someone who's seen and done things you can't imagine, threatens your entire worldview. I think you're attacking me because it's easier than admitting that maybe, just maybe, you don't know as much about the world as you think you do. Jessica's face went white, then red. How dare you, how dare I what? Maya interrupted. Tell the truth. Point out that you've been cruel and judgmental and completely out of line. How dare I defend myself against your prejudice and ignorance? The words hit like physical blows, and Jessica stumbled backward. She looked around the room for support, but found none. Her friends were looking at the floor, and the other students were either staring at Maya with new respect or glaring at Jessica with obvious disapproval. I didn't. Jessica stammered. You didn't what? Maya asked. Didn't mean it. Didn't think it through. Didn't realize that your words have consequences. Which is it? Professor Williams stepped between them, his face stern. All right, that's definitely enough. Jessica, I think you owe Maya an apology. And, then, we're all going to focus on our art and, leave the personal attacks at the door. Jessica looked like she wanted to argue, but, something in Maya's steady gaze made her think better of it. I'm sorry, she mumbled, barely audible. Maya studied her for a moment, then, nodded. Apology accepted, she said simply, and, turned back to her easel. The room slowly began to return to normal as students found their places and, Professor Williams began explaining the day's assignment. But, the atmosphere had changed permanently. Maya had established herself as someone not to be underestimated, someone with depths that these privileged kids couldn't fathom. As she mixed her paints, Maya allowed herself a small smile. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw the tattoos, the leather jacket, the quiet confidence, and, they made assumptions. But, if they really knew her story, if they knew where those tattoos came from and, what they represented, if they knew what she had done and, sacrificed and, overcome to be standing in this classroom. Well, that was a conversation for another day. For now, she had a painting to create, and, a group of narrow-minded students to educate about the dangers of judging people by their appearance. It was going to be an interesting semester. The weeks that followed the confrontation in art class established an uneasy peace. Maya continued to attend every session, arriving early and, staying late, completely focused on her work. She spoke when spoken to, helped classmates when they asked, and, gradually, the whispers began to die down. But, Jessica Chen wasn't ready to let things go. Maya was working on a particularly complex piece when she overheard Jessica talking to her friend Sarah near the supply closet. They weren't trying to be quiet. I still think there's something off about her, Jessica was saying. Did you see those scars on her hands? And, the way she just, stares sometimes. Like she's seeing something we can't see. Maybe you should just leave it alone, Sarah suggested quietly. Professor Williams made it pretty clear that he doesn't want any more drama in class. But, don't you want to know? Jessica pressed. Don't you wonder where someone like that comes from? What she's done? I mean, normal people don't just walk around looking like that. Maya's brush stilled on her canvas. She had been painting a memorial scene, something deeply personal that she'd never shared with anyone. The conversation behind her was pulling her back to a place she tried not to visit very often. My cousin works at the community center downtown, Jessica continued. She says Maya volunteers there sometimes, working with kids who have problems. Violent kids, drug addicts, gang members. What kind of person seeks that out? What kind of background do you need to relate to those people? Sarah was clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Jessica, maybe we should focus on our own work. I'm going to find out, Jessica declared. I'm going to figure out what her deal is. There's something she's hiding, and, I'm going to expose it. Maya set down her brush and, turned around slowly. Jessica immediately went quiet, her face flushing as she realized she'd been overheard. Is there something specific you'd like to know about me? Maya asked calmly. Because if you have questions, you could just ask instead of speculating behind my back. Jessica's chin went up defiantly. Fine. Where are you from? What did you do before you came here? Why do you have so many tattoos, and, why do you look like you've been in fights? The rest of the class had gone quiet again, sensing another confrontation brewing. Professor Williams wasn't in the room, having stepped out to take a phone call. Maya considered the questions for a moment. I'm from a lot of places, she said finally. I've moved around quite a bit. As for the tattoos, they tell stories. Personal stories. And, yes, I've been in fights. Sometimes fighting is necessary to protect yourself or others. See? Jessica turned to Sarah triumphantly. I knew it. You're some kind of criminal, aren't you? That's why you're here, taking community college classes instead of going to a real university. You're trying to clean up your image, start fresh. Maya shook her head slowly. You really can't help yourself, can you? You just have to keep pushing until you get a reaction. I'm not pushing, Jessica protested. I'm just asking reasonable questions. If you were normal, if you had nothing to hide, you'd just answer them. Normal, Maya repeated, and there was something dangerous in her tone now. What exactly do you think normal is, Jessica? Not covered in tattoos, Jessica shot back. Not looking like you're about to start a bar fight. Not volunteering to work with criminals and addicts. Normal people don't seek out dangerous situations. Dangerous situations, Maya said thoughtfully. She walked over to where Jessica was standing, moving with a fluid grace that made several students step back instinctively. You think I seek out dangerous situations? Don't you? Jessica challenged, though her voice was less certain now. Maya was close enough that Jessica could see the intricate details of her tattoos up close. There were symbols there, designs that didn't look random or decorative. They looked like they meant something specific, something important. You want to know about dangerous situations? Maya asked quietly. You want to know what's really dangerous? Jessica nodded, though she was beginning to look like she regretted starting this conversation. Dangerous is being 18 years old and having 3 seconds to decide whether the person walking toward you in a dark alley is carrying a weapon. Dangerous is being responsible for other people's lives when you can barely take care of your own. Dangerous is making split-second decisions that will either save someone or get them killed. The room was completely silent now. Maya's voice was still calm, but there was something in her words that made everyone lean in to listen. Dangerous is being in a place where the wrong choice doesn't just mean you fail a test or disappoint your parents. It means people die. Real people, with families and dreams and futures that depend on you making the right call. Jessica's face had gone pale. What are you talking about? Maya looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether to continue. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less intense. You want to know where I come from, Jessica? I come from places where survival isn't guaranteed. Where you learn to read people in seconds because your life might depend on it. Where you see things that change you forever, and you carry those images with you everywhere you go. She gestured to the tattoos on her arms. These aren't decorations. They're not rebellion or fashion statements. They're memories. Markers. Reminders of people and places and moments that shaped who I am. What kind of memories? Jessica whispered, clearly caught up in Maya's words despite herself. Maya was quiet for so long that everyone thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The kind you don't talk about in art class. Before anyone could respond, Professor Williams returned to the room. He immediately sensed the tension and looked between Maya and Jessica with concern. Is everything all right here? Everything's fine, Maya said, already turning back to her easel. Jessica was just asking about my background. Professor Williams looked skeptical, but he didn't press the issue. All right, well, let's focus on our work then. Maya, how is your piece coming along? Maya picked up her brush again. It's getting there. She had been painting a scene that looked like a memorial wall, covered in names and images. The detail was extraordinary, and it was clear that every element had been carefully planned and executed. Professor Williams stepped closer to examine her work. This is remarkable, he said genuinely. The technique is advanced, but, more than that, there's so much emotion in it. These people, they meant something to you. They did, Maya confirmed simply. Were they friends of yours? Maya's hand paused for just a moment. Yes. Among other things. Jessica, who had been listening to this exchange, couldn't help herself. What other things? Maya didn't turn around, but her voice carried clearly across the room. Family. Mentors. Heroes. Heroes? Jessica pressed. What kind of heroes? This time Maya did turn around, and there was something different in her expression. Something harder, more guarded. The kind who run toward danger when everyone else runs away from it. The kind who put other people's lives before their own. The kind who don't come home from doing the right thing. The weight of her words settled over the room like a blanket. Several students looked down at their own work, suddenly, feeling foolish about their trivial concerns and petty dramas. You lost people, Professor Williams said gently. It wasn't a question. I did. In combat? Maya was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was steady but there was pain underneath it. Among other places. Jessica looked confused. Combat? Like, overseas? Maya finally met her eyes directly. Among other places, she repeated. But, you're a girl, Jessica said stupidly, then, immediately flushed at how that sounded. Maya's smile was sharp and humorless. Yes, Jessica. I am a woman. What's your point? I didn't know that women could. I mean. Could what? Serve in combat roles. Risk their lives for their country. Make the same sacrifices as men. Maya's voice was getting that edge again. What exactly didn't you know, Jessica? Jessica looked around the room helplessly, realizing that she was once again saying exactly the wrong thing. I just didn't think. I mean, you don't look like. Like what? Like a soldier? Like someone who served their country? What does that look like, Jessica? I don't know, Jessica admitted miserably. Not like you. Maya shook her head in disbelief. Not like me. So in your mind, people who serve in the military all look the same. Act the same. Come from the same background. That's not what I meant, then, what did you mean? Maya interrupted. Because it sounds like you have a very narrow view of who gets to be a hero and, who doesn't. Professor Williams stepped forward again. Maya, perhaps you could tell us more about your art. This memorial piece is clearly very personal to you. Maya looked at the painting, then, back at the class. Most of the students were watching her with fascination now, completely absorbed in this glimpse into her real life. A few looked uncomfortable, probably because they were beginning to understand that they had been judging someone whose experiences were far beyond their comprehension. It's for the people I served with, Maya said quietly. The ones who didn't make it home. You were deployed? Asked Marcus, Jessica's friend, and, for the first time his voice held respect rather than mockery. Multiple times. Where? Maya hesitated. Afghanistan. Iraq. Syria. She paused. Other places that don't officially exist on deployment records. The room went completely silent. Even Jessica seemed to understand that she was in the presence of something much bigger than she had imagined. How long? Professor Williams asked gently. 8 years active duty. 2 more in reserves before I got out. And, now you're here, studying art therapy. Maya nodded. PTSD is real. It affects a lot of people coming back from deployment. Traditional therapy doesn't always work. Art can help in ways that talking sometimes can't. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each student. A lot of my friends are struggling. Some of them are homeless. Some of them are addicted to drugs or alcohol because it's the only way they can sleep at night. Some of them have killed themselves because they couldn't find a way to live with what they've seen and done. The weight of her words hit the room like a physical blow. Several students looked away, unable to meet her intense gaze. So yes, I volunteer at the community center. Yes, I work with people who have problems. Because I understand what it's like to have problems that normal people can't comprehend. I understand what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. Jessica's voice was very small when she finally spoke. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Maya looked at her for a long moment. No, you didn't. But, you didn't try to know, either. You just made assumptions and decided they were facts. I was wrong, Jessica admitted quietly. Yes, you were. But, more than that, you were cruel. You attacked me based on how I look without bothering to learn who I am. That says something about your character, Jessica. And, it's not something good. The truth of Maya's words hung in the air between them. Jessica looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. However, Maya continued, I'm willing to give you a chance to do better. We all make mistakes. The question is whether we learn from them. Professor Williams cleared his throat. I think this has been a very important conversation for all of us. Maya, thank you for sharing your story. It takes courage to be that open, especially when you've faced prejudice and ignorance. He looked around the room. I hope everyone here has learned something today about the danger of making assumptions about people. Art therapy is about healing, about helping people process trauma and pain. It requires empathy, understanding, and respect for others' experiences. He paused, letting his words sink in. If anyone in this room can't treat their classmates with basic human decency, regardless of how they look or where they come from, then, this is not the right program for you. The message was clearly directed at Jessica, who looked appropriately chastened. But, Maya could see something else in the girl's expression now, curiosity, and, maybe even a grudging respect. Maya, Professor Williams continued, I'd like to talk to you after class if you don't mind. I think your experience could be valuable to other students, and, I'd like to discuss some opportunities that might interest you. Maya nodded. Sure. The rest of the class passed in relative quiet as students worked on their pieces. But, the atmosphere was different now. People looked at Maya with new eyes, seeing not just the tattoos and the leather jacket, but the person underneath. The person who had served her country, who had lost friends, who was now dedicating her life to helping others heal. As students began packing up their supplies at the end of class, Jessica approached Maya's easel hesitantly. Maya, she said quietly. I really am sorry. For everything I said, and the way I acted. I was completely wrong about you. Maya looked up from cleaning her brushes. I appreciate that, Jessica. Could you maybe tell me more about your experience sometime? Not because I'm being nosy, but because I think I need to understand. I think I need to learn. Maya studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe. When you're ready to listen instead of judge. I'm ready now, Jessica said quickly. Maya smiled for the first time since the conversation began. No, you're not. But, you might be someday. And, when that day comes, we can talk. As Jessica walked away, Maya turned back to her painting. The memorial wall was nearly complete, filled with faces and names and memories that would stay with her forever. But, as she added the final touches, she found herself thinking not about the past, but about the future. About the students she might help, the healing she might facilitate, the understanding she might build between people who seemed different but were really more alike than they knew. It was going to be a long journey, but Maya had learned something important during her years of service. The most worthwhile missions were never easy, and the most important victories were often the ones that nobody else saw. 2 months had passed since Maya's revelation about her military service, and the dynamics in Professor Williams' art therapy class had shifted dramatically. Students who had once whispered about her now sought her advice on their projects. Jessica Chen, remarkably, had become one of her most attentive listeners, though their conversations remained cautious and formal. Maya was working on a new piece when Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the department head, entered the classroom during the lunch break. She was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen decades of student struggles and triumphs. Ms. Rodriguez? Dr. Morrison approached Maya's workspace. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Professor Williams has told me quite a bit about your background and your work here. Maya set down her brush and turned to face the department head. Of course. What can I help you with? Actually, I was hoping I could help you, Dr. Morrison said with a warm smile. We have a situation that requires someone with your unique qualifications, and I think it might interest you. Maya raised an eyebrow. What kind of situation? Dr. Morrison glanced around the empty classroom, then pulled up a chair next to Maya's easel. We've been contacted by the VA hospital downtown. They're looking for someone to run a pilot program for returning veterans who are struggling with PTSD and adjustment issues. Traditional therapy isn't reaching everyone, and they've heard about the success we've been having with art therapy. That sounds like important work, Maya said carefully. It is. But it's also challenging work. These are men and women who have seen combat, who are dealing with trauma that most civilians can't understand. They need someone who can relate to their experiences, someone they'll trust. Dr. Morrison paused, studying Maya's face. Professor Williams mentioned that you served overseas. He thought you might be uniquely qualified for this position. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. What exactly would the job involve? Running group therapy sessions 3 times a week, individual consultations as needed, and developing an art-based treatment program specifically designed for combat veterans. It would be part-time to start, but if the pilot is successful, it could become a full-time position with excellent benefits. And what makes you think I'm qualified for this? Dr. Morrison smiled. Your military service, obviously. But also your academic performance here, your natural leadership abilities, and the way you've handled some difficult situations in class. Professor Williams says you have an unusual combination of toughness and empathy that would be perfect for working with veterans. Maya looked at her memorial painting, thinking about all the faces she'd painted there. I'm still a student myself. I haven't even finished my degree yet. We could work around that. The position doesn't start for another month, which gives you time to finish this semester. And the hospital is willing to provide additional training and certification as part of the program. Before Maya could respond, the classroom door opened and Jessica Chen walked in, clearly expecting to find the room empty. She stopped short when she saw Maya and Dr. Morrison deep in conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica said quickly. I just forgot my phone. I'll come back later. It's all right, Dr. Morrison said. I was just finishing up with Ms. Rodriguez anyway. She turned back to Maya. Think about what I've said. This could be an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. After Dr. Morrison left, Jessica approached Maya's workspace hesitantly. Over the past 2 months, she had been making genuine efforts to understand Maya better, though their interactions were still somewhat awkward. That sounded like something important, Jessica said carefully. Maya nodded, still processing the conversation. The VA wants me to run a therapy program for veterans. That's amazing. Jessica's enthusiasm seemed genuine. You'd be perfect for that. Maya looked at her with surprise. You think so? Of course. You understand what they've been through in a way that most therapists never could. And you've seen how art can help people heal. Jessica paused, then added quietly, you've helped me understand things I never thought about before. Like what? Jessica sat down in the chair Dr. Morrison had vacated. Like how wrong I was about everything. About you, about what military service means, about what trauma looks like. She looked down at her hands. My brother joined the Marines last year. Before I met you, I thought it was just a job, you know. Something he was doing until he figured out what he really wanted to do with his life. Maya waited for her to continue. But, after listening to you talk about your service, about the people you lost. Jessica's voice trailed off. I realized I had no idea what he was really signing up for. What he might see, what he might have to do. What it might cost him. Has he been deployed yet? No, he's still in training. But, he will be, eventually. Jessica looked up at Maya. I'm scared for him now, in a way I wasn't before. Is that crazy? Maya shook her head. It's not crazy. It's realistic. Military service is serious business, and deployment is dangerous. Being scared for someone you love is normal. But, how do you handle it? The fear, I mean. How do families cope with knowing their loved ones are in danger? Maya considered the question. You take it one day at a time. You support each other. You stay connected as much as possible. And, you remember that fear is just love with nowhere to go. Jessica looked struck by that phrase. Love with nowhere to go. I never thought of it that way. Your brother is lucky to have someone who cares about him, Maya said. Not everyone has that kind of support. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Then, Jessica spoke up again. Can I ask you something? About the program Dr. Morrison was talking about. Sure. Are you going to take it? Maya sighed. I don't know. It would be an incredible opportunity, but, it would also be, difficult. Working with veterans who are struggling, seeing their pain every day, trying to help them when sometimes there is no help. She shrugged. It might be more than I can handle right now. Because of your own experiences? Maya nodded. PTSD isn't something you cure and forget about. It's something you manage. Some days are better than others. Taking on other people's trauma when you're still dealing with your own, it's risky. Jessica was quiet for a moment, then, said, but, you've already been doing that, haven't you? At the community center. That's different. That's just volunteering a few hours a week. Is it really that different? Or are you just scared? Maya looked at Jessica sharply. Excuse me. Jessica flushed but, didn't back down. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be presumptuous. It's just, you've spent the last 2 months teaching all of us about courage and service and not making assumptions about people. But, maybe you're making assumptions about yourself. What do you mean? I mean maybe you're assuming you can't handle it when you haven't even tried. Maybe you're assuming that because you have your own struggles, you can't help other people with theirs. Maya stared at her, genuinely taken aback. Jessica had been quiet and apologetic for so long that Maya had almost forgotten the fierce personality that had gotten them into conflict in the first place. You think I should take the job? I think you're the only person I've met who should take the job, Jessica said firmly. You have the experience, the education, the empathy, and, most importantly, you have the credibility. Those veterans will listen to you because you've been where they are. Maya turned back to her painting, thinking about Jessica's words. The memorial wall was complete now, filled with the faces of friends and comrades who would never come home. But, maybe that was exactly why she needed to help the ones who did make it back. There's something else, Jessica said quietly. Something I've been wanting to tell you. Maya looked at her expectantly. I've been volunteering at the community center too. Started about a month ago. Really? Jessica nodded. I wanted to understand what you were doing there, what drew you to work with people who have problems. And. She paused, searching for the right words. I wanted to do something meaningful for once, instead of just talking about it. How's it going? Hard. Really hard. Some of those kids have been through things that make my worst day look like a minor inconvenience. But, also rewarding, in a way I never expected. Maya smiled slightly. It changes your perspective, doesn't it? Everything changes your perspective, Jessica agreed. I look at people differently now. I listen differently. I think about what they might be carrying that I can't see. That's good. That's growth. I have you to thank for that, Jessica said. If you hadn't called me out on my prejudice and ignorance, I might have gone through my whole life making the same assumptions, treating people the same way. Maya studied Jessica's face, seeing something there she hadn't noticed before. A maturity that hadn't been there 2 months ago, a depth that came from genuine self-reflection and change. You know, Maya said slowly, if I do take this job at the VA, I'll need volunteers. People who can help with administrative tasks, set up equipment, maybe even assist with some of the art projects. Jessica's eyes lit up. Are you offering me a chance to help? I'm saying that if you're serious about this volunteer work, if you're committed to learning and growing and helping other people heal, then, yes, there might be a place for you in the program. I'm serious, Jessica said immediately. More serious than I've ever been about anything. Maya nodded. Then, we'll see what happens. The classroom door opened again, and Professor Williams entered with a stack of graded assignments. Maya, Jessica, he greeted them. Burning the midnight oil? Just discussing some opportunities, Maya replied. Professor Williams set down the papers and looked at Maya seriously. Dr. Morrison mentioned she spoke with you about the VA program. I hope you'll consider it. I think it could be transformative, both for the veterans you'd work with and for the field of art therapy in general. I'm leaning toward saying yes, Maya admitted. But, it's a big step. The biggest steps usually are, Professor Williams observed. But, sometimes they're also the most important ones. He handed Maya her graded assignment from the previous week. Outstanding work, as usual. Your memorial piece is particularly powerful. Have you considered submitting it to the student art show next month? Maya shook her head. It's too personal. Personal art is often the most important art, Professor Williams said gently. Art that comes from real experience, real pain, real healing, that's the art that changes people. That's the art that matters. Maya looked at her painting again, seeing it through Professor Williams' eyes. Maybe he was right. Maybe sharing her story, her grief, her healing process could help other people understand what veterans go through. I'll think about it, she said. After Professor Williams left, Maya and Jessica sat in the quiet classroom, both contemplating the changes that had brought them to this moment. Can I ask you one more question? Jessica said finally. Sure. When you were deployed, when things were really bad, what kept you going? What made you keep fighting? Maya was quiet for a long time, thinking about firefights in the desert, about friends who didn't make it home, about moments when survival seemed impossible. The person next to me, she said finally. Knowing that someone else was counting on me to do my job, to have their back, to not give up. And, knowing that they were doing the same for me. Jessica nodded slowly. That's what this feels like. Having your back, I mean. Knowing that you're not facing things alone. Maya looked at Jessica with new respect. You're going to be all right, Jessica. You've come a long way from the girl who attacked me on the first day of class. I'm embarrassed by that person, Jessica admitted. But, I'm also grateful that you didn't write me off completely. You gave me a chance to be better. Everyone deserves a chance to be better, Maya said. That's what this work is about. That's what healing is about. As they packed up their supplies and prepared to leave, Maya felt something shift inside her. The decision about the VA job was becoming clearer, and, for the first time in months, she felt genuinely excited about the future. She had found her purpose, her mission, her way to honor the friends she'd lost while helping the friends who'd made it home. It wasn't going to be easy, but, then, again, nothing worthwhile ever was. 3 months later, Maya stood in front of the newly renovated art therapy room at the VA hospital, surveying the space that would soon house her pilot program. Easels lined the walls, art supplies filled built-in cabinets, and natural light streamed through large windows that had been specifically designed to create a calming atmosphere. It was everything she had envisioned and more. "It looks amazing," Jessica said from behind her, carrying a box of additional supplies they'd purchased with a grant from the hospital foundation. Over the past months, Jessica had proven herself to be an invaluable volunteer, helping Maya develop curriculum, organize materials, and prepare for the program launch. "I can't believe it's really happening," Maya admitted, running her hand along one of the tables where veterans would soon be creating art as a pathway to healing. The door opened and Dr. Morrison entered with a man Maya didn't recognize. He was tall, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and the straight posture that marked him as former military. But it was his eyes that caught Maya's attention. They held the same haunted quality she saw in her own mirror some mornings. "Maya," Dr. Morrison said, "I'd like you to meet Colonel James Patterson, retired. He's going to be our liaison with the VA and will help coordinate referrals to your program." Colonel Patterson stepped forward and extended his hand. "Ms. Rodriguez, it's an honor to meet you. I've heard impressive things about your work." Maya shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the way his eyes assessed her quickly but thoroughly. "Thank you, sir. I hope the program lives up to expectations." "I'm confident it will," he said. "In fact, I was hoping I might speak with you privately for a moment." Dr. Morrison took the hint. "Jessica and I will go check on the final supply delivery. Take your time." After they left, Colonel Patterson walked over to one of Maya's paintings that was hanging on the wall, a piece she'd created specifically for this space that depicted soldiers supporting each other through difficult terrain. "You served in Afghanistan," he said, not looking away from the painting. "Yes, sir. 2011 to 2014. Maya tensed slightly. "Among other tours, yes." Colonel Patterson turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "Forward Operating Base Chapman." Maya's breath caught. Chapman had been one of her most difficult deployments, a place where she'd lost several close friends in an attack that had nearly killed her as well. Very few people knew the details of what had happened there. "How do you know about Chapman?" she asked carefully. Instead of answering, Colonel Patterson reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. He handed it to Maya, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were military photographs, official reports, and news clippings. But it was the first photo that made Maya's knees weak. It showed her in full combat gear, carrying a wounded soldier to safety while under heavy fire. Her face was partially obscured by smoke and dirt, but her tattoos were clearly visible on her arms. "Operation Nightfall," Colonel Patterson said quietly. "September 15, 2013. You saved 7 lives that night, including mine." Maya looked up at him sharply, studying his face more carefully. Slowly, recognition dawned. "Patterson. Jimmy Patterson. You were the communications specialist." "I was. And you were the Navy SEAL who ran back into hell 3 times to pull us out." The folder slipped from Maya's hands, photographs scattering across the floor. Jessica, entering the room at that moment, immediately rushed to help gather them up. But, as she picked up the photos, her face went white with shock. "Maya," Jessica whispered, staring at the images. "You're a Navy SEAL," Colonel Patterson confirmed. "One of the first female SEALs to see combat, and one of the best soldiers I've ever had the privilege to serve with." Jessica continued staring at the photographs, struggling to reconcile the woman she'd come to know with the warrior depicted in these images. Maya in full tactical gear, emerging from the shadows like a ghost. Maya carrying wounded comrades to safety. Maya receiving the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism. "The Navy Cross," Jessica breathed, reading the caption on one of the news clippings. "That's the second highest military decoration for valor," Maya said quietly. "Awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat." Colonel Patterson picked up one of the photographs, Maya standing with her SEAL team before a mission. You never told them, did you? Your classmates, your professors. They have no idea what you really are. I'm not that person anymore, Maya said firmly. That was a lifetime ago. No, Colonel Patterson said gently. That person is exactly who you are. Who you've always been. You just found a new way to serve, a new way to save lives. Jessica was still staring at the photographs, tears running down her face. All this time, she whispered. All those awful things I said to you, all the assumptions I made, and, you're a hero. You're a literal hero. I'm not a hero, Maya said uncomfortably. I just did my job. Your job was to be one of the most elite soldiers in the world, Colonel Patterson corrected. Your job was to go places other people couldn't go and, do things other people couldn't do. Your job was to lay your life on the line for your country and, your teammates every single day. He picked up another photograph, this one showing Maya receiving her medal from the Secretary of the Navy. You want to know what I remember most about that night at Chapman? It wasn't the explosions or the gunfire or the chaos. It was your voice on the radio, calm and steady, calling out positions and coordinates while bullets were flying past your head. You saved my life, Maya. You saved all our lives. Maya sat down heavily in one of the chairs, overwhelmed by the flood of memories the photographs had triggered. Why are you here, Jimmy? Why now? Because I heard about what you're doing here, and I wanted to make sure you understood something. Colonel Patterson pulled up a chair across from her. What you're building here, this program you've created, it's going to save more lives than you ever saved in combat. The veterans who come through these doors, they're fighting a different kind of war now. A war against memories, against trauma, against the feeling that they don't belong in the civilian world. He gestured to the art-filled room around them. But, you understand that war because you've fought it yourself. You understand what it's like to come home from combat and, feel like nobody around you can possibly comprehend what you've been through. Jessica finally, found her voice. That's why you work with troubled kids at the community center. That's why you understand trauma better than anyone. You've been there. Maya nodded slowly. PTSD doesn't care about your rank or your medals or how many people think you're a hero. It's still there when you wake up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. because you heard a car backfire. It's still there when you can't go to crowded places because you're constantly scanning for threats that don't exist. But, you found a way to channel it, Colonel Patterson observed. To use your experience to help others heal. Art saved my life, Maya said simply. After I got out, I was struggling. Really struggling. Traditional therapy wasn't working. I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. But, then, I started painting, started putting my experiences and emotions onto canvas, and, something clicked. She gestured to the memorial painting on the wall. Every face in that painting represents someone I served with who didn't make it home. For a long time, that painting was about grief and loss and survivor's guilt. But, now, when I look at it, I see something else. I see a reminder of why I need to help the ones who did make it home. Professor Williams appeared in the doorway, followed by Dr. Morrison and several VA officials who had come for the program launch. Maya, are you ready for the first group? Maya looked around the room, at the art supplies waiting to be used, at Colonel Patterson who represented her past, at Jessica who represented her future, at the photographs that told the story of who she had been and who she was becoming. I'm ready, she said. An hour later, the first group of veterans filed into the room. They were a diverse mix, men and women of different ages, different branches of service, different struggles. Some looked skeptical, others appeared resigned, and a few seemed genuinely curious about what this art therapy program might offer them. Maya stood at the front of the room, no longer hiding behind anonymity. The photographs from her SEAL service were displayed prominently on a bulletin board, not as boasts but as credentials. These veterans needed to know they could trust her, that she understood their world. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying the authority and confidence that had once commanded respect in combat zones around the world. "My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I'm a former Navy SEAL. I did 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I lost more friends than I care to count." The room went completely silent. Several veterans sat up straighter, their expressions shifting from skepticism to attention. "I also have PTSD," Maya continued. "I've had panic attacks in grocery stores, nightmares that lasted for days, and moments where I didn't think I could go on living with the memories in my head. So if you're here because someone told you that you need help, if you're here because traditional therapy isn't working, if you're here because you don't think anyone can understand what you're going through, I want you to know that you're not alone." A hand went up in the back of the room. It belonged to a young woman with short cropped hair and nervous eyes. "Master Chief Rodriguez? Just Maya is fine. Is it true that you carried 7 people to safety under fire?" Maya met her eyes directly. "I did what anyone in my unit would have done. I did what you would have done if you were in my position." "But, you're the one who did it," another veteran said. This one was older, probably Army by his bearing. "You're the one who went back." "Yes," Maya said simply. "And, now I'm here, in this room, dealing with the aftermath of that night and many others like it. Just like you are dealing with the aftermath of your own experiences." She moved to the center of the room, where easels and art supplies waited. "The difference between then and now is that we're not fighting alone anymore. We're fighting together, using art as our weapon against the darkness that sometimes threatens to overwhelm us." Jessica watched from the corner of the room, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed Maya's transformation. This was the person she had attacked and belittled on that first day of art class, a decorated war hero who had literally risked everything to save other people's lives. The shame of her past behavior was overwhelming, but it was tempered by gratitude that Maya had given her the chance to learn and grow. As the veterans began working on their first art projects, Maya moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement. She spoke their language, understood their experiences, and could offer hope based on her own journey toward healing. Colonel Patterson watched from the observation window, a satisfied smile on his face. He had known this program would be successful, but seeing Maya in action exceeded even his high expectations. She had found her new mission, her new way to serve, her new way to save lives. And, in a classroom across town, Professor Williams was showing Maya's original memorial painting to a new group of art therapy students, telling them the story of a tattooed girl who had been judged and dismissed, only to reveal herself as one of the most heroic individuals any of them would ever meet. The legend of Maya Rodriguez was just beginning to spread, inspiring a new generation of healers and reminding everyone who heard it that heroes come in many forms, and that sometimes, the most powerful weapon against darkness is the courage to share your story and help others find their own path to the light.